Rethinking evolution. Evolution as a life maximizing system. In this video, we'll explore understanding evolution from an energy perspective. Darwinian evolution is based on two simple observations. One, that there's a selection mechanism, not everything lives, and that some species die out. And two, that there's a mixing mechanism, so we're not exactly like our parents. The two mixing mechanisms are sex and genetic mutations. From these two simple observations, all of Darwinian evolution can be understood, despite religious conservatives trying to constantly find the supposed missing link. That's got nothing to do with Darwinian evolution. Even the most fundamental of fundamentalist Christians understands these two simple principles. They don't look exactly like their parents. That is, there is a mixing mechanism, and not everything lives. That there's a selection mechanism, because people die and animals die. But before we move on, we should dispel with two other stupid ideas about evolution. One of them is social Darwinism. I did a whole video on this. This starts the stupid idea of survival of the fittest, which leads to the idea of just a single species being alive or a single entity in that species, which is the exact opposite of what we see in evolution. In fact, that would lead to extinction of all species. Another modern variation that's come along is altruism in evolution. This is being pushed by socialist Marxists, and it's described as, in biology, altruism is the behavior of an individual that increases the fitness of another individual while decreasing their own. This was first proposed by W.D. Hamilton. The canonical explanation for evolutionary altruism is kin selection, which was mathematically derived. Remember that. It was mathematically derived. This is not based on observations. In the 1960s by W.D. Hamilton, which emphasizes the importance of genetic relationships. A paper analyzed all these models. They didn't analyze empirical data. This is not science. As I've pointed out before, mathematical Platonism is not science. It's the exact opposite of science. At best, these proponents of altruism in evolution don't understand what altruism is. Altruism was coined by Auguste Comte, who believed that individuals had a moral obligation to renounce their own self-interest. In explaining altruism, Comte says the social point of view cannot tolerate the notion of rights, for such notions rest on individualism. We are born under a load of obligations of every kind to our predecessors, to our successors, and to our contemporaries. To live for others is the definitive formula for human morality according to Comte and altruism. If you apply this definition of altruism to evolutionary biology, you end up with every species going extinct. Every species, every individual in every species has to prioritize their own life in order to perpetuate the species in any way, shape, or form. I've done a whole video on this, and one of the obvious examples we deal with in everyday life is oxygen masks in airlines. What do they tell you? They tell you to put on your oxygen mask first before you put on the oxygen mask of small children, because if you pass out, you can't save the child. This is the stupidity of altruism, and it's got nothing to do with evolution. This is politics dressed up as science. Having dispensed with these two political theories disguised as evolutionary theories, let's move on to some real science. Evolution can be seen as an energy maximizing system. This system is designed to increase the total amount of energy used by life. By design, I'm talking about the natural result of the process, not that people or a deity actively designed it. Looking at evolution from an energy maximizing point of view, we see that the mixing mechanism is an attempt to try to define new life forms to exploit untapped sources of energy so that more sources of energy can be exploited to turn into life. Some extreme examples include sulfur vents. where bacteria like Thermococcus and Pyrococcus can be found living off sulfur vents in very inhospitable regions. And a genre of hyperthermophilic anaerobic archaea, which are not bacteria, that thrive in extreme environments such as deep sea hydrothermal vents. They're critical to the ecology of these vents, acting as primary consumers of organic material and using sulfur compounds to survive. This is an area where we would have thought no life form could exist, but there was an energy source, so life found a way to convert that energy source into life. Another example of an extreme organism that we would have thought would not have been possible are oil-eating bacteria. There are a number of species that do this, and as we all know, oil is a long carbon chain. Therefore, it contains lots of energy if it can just be oxidized. And for years and years, environmentalists told us that these oil spills would contaminate huge areas for centuries, like the Deepwater Horizon oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico in 2010. But in fact, the huge oil spill following the Deepwater Horizon explosion in April 20th of 2010 that Obama then pressured BP to pay $20 billion for claims turned out to be a non-event. Why did it turn out to be a non-event? Because before the oil slick got to the Gulf shores of Alabama and Florida and the other Gulf states, most of the oil was eliminated by these oil-eating bacteria. And by the way, these oil-eating bacteria are natural because oil seeps naturally out of the ocean floor. So there's another huge source of energy. So life found a way to convert that energy into more life. This is one of the lies that environmentalists push in California. They see the oil globules forming up on the coast, and they argue that it's because of the offshore drilling. Those oil blobs on the California coast are there because the oil is seeping up from the bottom of the ocean all on its own. It has nothing to do with the offshore oil drilling. In fact, offshore drilling would reduce the amount of oil that washes up on those California beaches. When we look at evolution through this lens of evolution being an energy maximizing system for life, we see that the selection mechanism is a way of eliminating species that are not as efficient at converting energy into life as other species. The energy perspective on evolution explains both the selection mechanism and the mixing mechanism. We see that life is found in all sorts of areas that we didn't expect before, and is able to survive conditions that we didn't think was possible, which provides more evidence for this idea of evolution as a maximizing system for increasing the total energy used by life. But why would evolution result in rational animals, that is, human beings? In other words, how does reason help increase the total energy used by life? Rational animals are able to change environments to increase the total biomass that's converting energy into life. We see that's what happens in our farming and our grazing. But on a deeper level, reason allows rational animals to create inventions, which increase the amount of energy that's converted into life. And this is a much faster process than normal evolution. I did a whole video showing that inventions are very much the same thing evolutionarily as the mixing mechanism of biological evolution. This explains the great increase in human population when we went through the agricultural revolution, increasing the number of animals and plants that humans can use, and therefore increasing the population of humans and the plants and animals that they domesticated, thus converting more energy into life. But an even more profound example was the Industrial Revolution, when humans figured out how to turn energy sources such as coal and oil into work, substituting mechanical energy for animal energy, thus resulting in an explosion in the number of human beings, but also in the animals and the plants that the human beings use to stay alive. Despite environmental scare stories, the increase in the number of human beings increased the total amount of life on Earth. For instance, There are forests where there were not forests before human beings, such as the plain states of the United States. Whenever trees, elephants, oil, or something like that is protected by property rights, what we see is that it's used as a resource and that the amount of that resource just increases. Despite the stupidity of Marxist environmentalists arguing that we're destroying our environment, in fact, the amount of biodiversity just keeps increasing as the number of humans increase. The climate change hoax has shown that environmentalists are not concerned about the environment. The real goal is to eliminate human beings. So why would we listen to their nonsense? They're not scientists, they're just a death cult. But what reason does is that it gives us the ability to invent, which is an alternative to genetic mutations or sexual mixing, but much faster. Reason allows us to convert energy into life much faster. Reason is a natural selection for maximizing the amount of energy that is converted into life. Anti-reason apostles are anti-environment and anti-human, and we're nowhere near the carrying capacity of Earth. If we maximize all the energy that reaches Earth, we could have a carrying capacity of 80 trillion human beings, which I showed in another video. Long live freedom, damn it.